Hey,
Hi.
hi,
Happy holidays. It's December. I'm Farah,
and I'm Nicole.
and welcome to the Scoop. And we have a special guest. How you doing there, Santa? So he'll just be along for the ride for a little bit until he gets tired. Today we are going to do it on AI and ABA.
hmm
The field is ever changing in life, and with all of the AI stuff that is implemented in
hmm
really every area. I mean, I have a Google
Yeah.
phone, so like it talks to me and
Oh yeah.
it predicts, and
Uh-huh.
how you speak, and talk about a topic, and then it's coming up on your phone and it's
hmm
suggesting things. So it's been around for a long time, but it's really diving into our field and taking over. So what have you seen in our field?
Yeah. A lot of things. You can take like courses on AI and how to implement it into like your practice nowadays.
Really?
Yeah.
Like what?
Like how to either like I've used it to like make stimuli, use it as like a form of teaching like vocational skills to individuals,
Ooh.
along with like virtual reality. Oh, Santa doesn't like that. Here we are,
Oh.
buddy.
Well, he probably won't last much longer. He's
Yeah.
getting tired. I'll hold his hand for a little bit. So have you done that? Have you?
Yeah, so I've used I typically use Chat GPT, but to make social stories, it's really fun. It comes out with like whatever, so like you can say like I want a social story on
Oh,
like I don't know, good learner behaviors in the classroom, and it will make like a
wow.
whole
That is cool. That
yeah,
that
yeah.
that's very cool.
It makes it in like seconds.
Wow.
Like doctor, like taking your kids to like the doctor's office. It will make social stories on that.
Can you put in key terms and then it just
Yeah,
populates
and then
it?
it
Is
just
that what it does?
populates it. Yeah. You can do
Wow.
them where like I had a client who wanted like a special character like Daniel the Tiger to like be in the story. So you can tell it that you want Daniel Tiger to like read a social story about
That saves a lot of
yeah,
time.
going to the doctor or the dentist
Can you
or
put pictures in there too of specific things?
you can the chat that I use to do it like doesn't it will like say like insert picture, insert picture, insert picture. It won't like populate the pictures for me, but there are ones that will.
So then you just pull it over, put it in there.
Yeah.
That specific one, and it puts in the specific part where it says insert, right? So you
Yes.
have to physically,
Uh-huh.
but then there are some that you could just put in there and it populates it into your story.
Yes. hmm
That's crazy. It's amazing. I
Yeah.
mean, that helps save a lot of time. Like
Yeah, and
how
they're all
many?
like free too. Most of them are free. I think you can buy, like paid ones that
Yeah,
probably do other
like
things, but I just use like a free like chat GPT and it
wow,
makes yeah,
that's very cool.
yeah.
Well, I know the other day so we have the cafe, and the other
hmm
day you were like, we were talking about budgeting and what we were doing, and you're like,
hmm
well, hold on, let me just make it right now. And
Yeah.
you put it in, and you're like, here's your budget, here's your this, here's your that.
Yeah.
So like that, it's everywhere.
It is. It really is everywhere. I mean, you can make all of like the our intake paperwork or our like all our
Wow.
paperwork, all our letters can be all made
So are we
through.
concerned that people will be taken out of the picture?
I don't know. I mean, so far it's just made life a little bit like easier
Easier?
as far as like some of the administrative duties that you have to like make different like policies and things like that.
Mhm.
They can all be made through like an AI feature. So far I've just seen like productivity increase with it, not necessarily like taking the people
Okay.
away because you need the people to like input the things into the
It's just
program.
faster and you can get more done. Like you
Yeah,
said, your productivity.
yeah, yeah.
That's so what else have you seen besides the social stories? We were talking about budgeting,
hmm
paperwork, intake paperwork. What else have you seen that has been very helpful? programming or
Well,
what have you?
I have some mentors that are teachers and BCBAs, and so they've made things like math worksheets or like word problems, problem solving, critical thinking. So they've done a lot of like worksheet based things through AI because it will just populate like you can say sometimes you have to get really specific, but you can say, okay, I want 5 math problems on
Oh my gosh.
whatever.
So,
Or you can
oh,
say like topic is critical thinking, scenarios, so things like that.
that's
Yeah.
great. So our teachers can, and just in general, but teachers specifically, are they concerned about, so what do you call that? Cheating, because you can do all of that and you can do stuff that you could have in your ear and you're
Hmm.
doing test taking or you're doing and you can just ask. Like, couldn't you just do the same
Yeah.
thing? Couldn't you find it? So what's the word I'm looking for too?
Like plagiarism.
Plagiarism.
Yeah.
And because how do you, if you can have something write a paper for you, I'm sure that you could do it so it was specific to you by changing some things around. How do you do, have they talked
Hmm.
about that at all?
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of them are educators or professors at universities, and there is concern over like plagiarism, and the use of AI like for that.
Yeah.
However, they also will approve certain aspects of it. So like a lot of times they'll read or edit your paper, for example, like you write your paper, you turn it in, they edit it or whatever. And then from there, like sometimes like the AI can just reorganize your like sentences. So like
Okay.
you could so some of it could be yes, like there's a huge concern over like plagiarism for sure. And it can be very useful for writers and it be approved in certain aspects.
So it has your idea, but it makes it
Yeah, like you can tell it to not change any of the content and
okay.
rearrange the sentences to make it more cohesive and concise. Or you can submit things in there and say, hey, make this more like scholarly.
Yeah.
Um, it will
Wow.
have like there's ways to tell that if someone wrote like a whole paper using AI, especially a paper that needs to have citations in it because
Okay.
it has like what's called like ghost citations. So
Oh,
they don't actually exist. So like being careful
I didn't even
with
think about
like
that.
yeah, with either plagiarism or having it write a whole paper because like there are ways to tell.
Well, I it's been so many years since I've been in school, and of course you're in school right now. So
Mhm.
I can't like if when I think back when I was doing my undergrad, I mean I would go to like classes to help me to write simple thing like just I mean this is so long ago.
Mhm.
So like you don't even really need that anymore with AI, right?
No,
Because
you
it'll just
don't,
do it
because
for you.
I'm not like a good writer, and so
Okay.
I will like put a sentence in and say take out the word but like all the like
Oh, out of your whole
unscholarly,
paper?
yeah, like out of the like usually I do like a paragraph, right? And I say like okay, like take out the word that,
Oh my
and
gosh, I
it
didn't
will
think about
take it
that.
out and it will like replace it with something else. Or you can say like make this more like scholarly.
Scholarly.
So I'll write all my ideas out and it's all my writing. They just rearrange like the sentences.
So it probably sounds like you're like, yeah.
It's the same thing that
Yeah,
like an editor
yeah.
would do, or like if you went to the library and said like, hey, like make my work more scholarly, it would be the same thing that they would do.
But now you're not having to go, like for me, I'm not a good writer. It takes a lot. I can, but it's a lot of work.
Mhm.
I would have to go to classes and they would teach you
Yeah, and they
how to
teach,
do those
yeah,
things.
yeah.
And then I would get, I still remember it. I mean, I still actually use it because I still think of those things. But you wouldn't really need to do that. You would really learn, right? To how
Hmm.
just to learn AI of like, I'm not saying you wouldn't learn as you were doing it because you'd see it, but it's still a little bit
Yeah.
different because of the
Yeah.
technology. It's showing you like you don't want but or run-ons or right,
Uh-huh.
all of those
Yeah.
different things.
Hmm.
That's so interesting. Hmm. Is that a
Yeah.
specific program then for the
No,
paper? Or is it
no,
just a
it's
regular?
just it's Chat GPT and it goes through it
Okay, so
all.
that's for everything. How do you
Pretty
get that?
well. You can like Google search it, just chat
Oh,
GPT, and then it takes you to like a website.
okay. So is it
Um,
kind of what's on like Facebook if you put it in there and
yeah, you could do it on, yeah. So
okay.
there's like an option to, yeah. There's a bunch of different ones. I mean, I've used Julius as another one,
Okay.
who like that AI feature makes more like graphs. It actually codes for you. So like you could like input what
Hmm.
kind of graph.
Really?
Yeah, so it did like it will graph for you. So I can insert like a field of data,
Hmm.
and then I'll say, okay, make a like multiple baseline design using this data set. And it will code it all too. So it will give you the actual graph, but it will also give you the code.
So then you can do
So
other
you can
stuff.
do other stuff. Yeah.
So it like so JJ, my son, is wants to go into coding. Does he not have a career now?
I don't
I'm
know.
curious
That's like
because he loves it.
some of those careers. Yeah, I'm not
Probably
sure.
are, I'm curious. I'm really curious.
I'm sure that like in order to create Julius, there's people that
So
need to
maybe
know how to
there's
code, you know.
yeah, but that's really interesting because
Yeah.
then now you have it and now you yeah, that's wow. And that's okay to do? Like that's okay? That's
Hmm.
not cheating in school or
No, because you could do the same thing with like there's a site called Fiverr that you
okay.
can like basically employ people to like make different things for you, like for like your business or like a logo or whatever.
Wow.
So it would be the same thing as like paying somebody to
Yeah.
make it for you.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
no, a lot of it's there's some ethical concerns with it for sure, and like plagiarism and things
Mhm.
at like an educational level. But as long as you're not saying like, make me a paper on blah blah
Right.
blah,
Right. And then you don't have to do anything.
yeah.
So you're like, okay. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm curious.
there's a right and wrong way to use it, I think.
Yeah.
As much as I talk about there's no right and wrong, there is like plagiarism versus
Right.
not.
So where
So,
do you think, because I mean, like, people in general are like, okay, so you have AI and you have like, I don't know what you call them, robots or whatever, that
mhm,
they're doing right now that are, I mean, I've seen them, they have them out for families. You can pay for, I mean, I don't know how, they're probably really expensive.
mhm.
But where do you, this is kind of the same thing. Like there's good and there's bad, right? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
so
Yeah.
where do you see this as a concern in the field besides plagiarism? Do you see it in other, like, would you see anything being like where that
I
would
can
go?
see it be like breaking like HIPAA to a certain extent, if
Oh,
not used like appropriately. Because like, well, Central Reach, we use Central Reach for all of our data collection, right? They have an AI feature for scheduling for notes, which because their system is HIPAA compliant and you're utilizing the AI feature within their system,
mm-hmm.
then you wouldn't break some of those.
Because you're in the system and it doesn't go outside of the system,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Yeah.
But if you're using a feature like Chat GPT and you're inputting like client information or
Oh,
whatever to
yeah.
make something specific, then yes, that would be like breaking
That's
HIPAA.
true. Yeah.
So it's like I see it more of an issue of like the confidentiality
Mhm.
pieces as it relates directly to our field.
And it pulls it out because we are HIPAA compliant, but you could pull it out into a paper or, right? Or
Yeah, yeah. So you would have to
data
use
graphs or whatever.
Well, yeah, so you would have to use like an AI feature that Central Reach has embedded into their
Mhm.
program where like you have to use that system. Because as soon as you take it out of that system and you say, okay, write me a treatment plan on blah 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 blah, then you're breaking some of
So do they
that.
have that feature?
Central Reach does, yeah.
Treatment planning too?
I don't know about treatment planning. They have our notes and stuff. So I'm wondering, I haven't used it, but I'm wondering if it works in a similar way where you could say, like, let's say you write a summary about your
Mhm.
session with a client. It might like edit it for you and make it sound more scholarly or make it sound more observable, or like you
Yeah.
might be able to like do some of those things.
Because I'm curious if you did a treatment plan and you were like, I don't know, a treatment plan on with this information for optimum. I wonder if they'd say blah blah blah. Or
I
if
don't
for
know.
TRICARE. I bet you that's coming.
I bet you it
Something
is
like that is
coming
coming.
where they can, yeah, the only thing I'd be concerned about if Central Reach AI system made treatment plans, they have a note and form that does the treatment plan. So like
Oh,
maybe they could pull it out of the learning tree. I'm sure they could do anything. Honestly, the more I talk about it, I'm sure they could
I
figure out
can't.
how to have it do everything for you.
So they do have notes and forms AI then?
From my understanding, they do, yeah.
So I'm curious, yeah. I mean, because that's one thing, of course, I can't remember our person's name, but I know they talked about the scheduling piece and
Yeah.
we had looked at that. How does that work? How does it like, because you said you still need people, right?
Yeah, you still
To
need
put
the
it in.
person behind the system, right, to put it all in. From my understanding, the scheduling feature starts to identify people that have been on certain
Oh,
clients.
so
So
it
it teaches
plugs.
itself, right, like that this BTT has been with these clients X amount of times. So
Ah,
you can click that they like called in or whatever, and it will fill in
ah.
with the next BTT. Like it will rearrange the whole schedule because it's learned.
Okay, so it's like your phone. So you look at
Yeah, it is.
stuff
Yeah.
and then it the algorithm
Yeah.
it forms that algorithm of, oh,
Hmm.
you looked at this and so I'm going to show you all these things.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
It will
Okay.
flag the notes. Like I don't know if it writes the notes, but it will definitely flag the notes if there's certain things like missing
Okay.
from the notes, which is why I don't see why it wouldn't like create like a summary of the
Right.
note. Um,
Well, that
so
certainly would make uh everyone's life easier
yeah, it
for
would.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is really interesting. Okay, so there was some research articles that we were looking at. Is there anything that
Hmm.
you want to specifically talk about or reference? Is there anything you want me to click on here?
Yeah, I wanted the one that says like navigating some of the like ethical guidelines. It was more of like a website. It was really hard for me to find
This
that
one.
one, yeah. Research articles on some of it, just depending on like what it was. But this one specifically, it's by Janet S. Tyman, maybe. Um, but it's more of like a blog and it talks about like the ethical pieces of AI and how our world is in behavior analysis is switching to some of these areas. So they do talk about like client well-being and privacy as far as some of these systems go, what safeguards are needed to prevent any like misinterpretation of AI generative outcomes, who bears the responsibility for the conduct of the AI system to support ABA therapy. Because there's also research articles that are starting to look at AI as the technician and how that
Oh,
like so like a robot more so would be the technician. And so this article kind of talks about like ethical considerations for when that's occurring as well.
so that's
Um,
what this is.
yeah,
Yeah.
so they have a little, yeah, like a little, it's more of a blog, so they have like some pictures and things on there, how you get like informed consent to use some of the AI features, privacy and data security. So all the things that we kind of noted today is like
That's what
making
this is
sure their
saying.
information doesn't come. Yeah, so it gives these links to legal compliance and regulation pieces. So that's a helpful tool maybe for some people who are using more of this more often is their consent to do that. Now, in Central Reach, if you use AI features in Central Reach, then like, yeah, what does that look like as far as, because that system is already HIPAA compliant.
Right.
And there's already consent to input all the family's information within that system.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just also being careful that now if I use AI to make a social story, the person's name's not in there, right? I just say make a social story about going to the doctor, and
Right.
then they input all that. So you have to be really careful that you're not like asking it to put names in there or like things of that nature.
It's interesting, because I'm just looking over here too of like how to track facial expressions, vocal tones during therapy sessions to provide automatic feedback to practitioners. I would think too that you would have, I mean, this is the good and the bad, right? You're sitting there and you're teaching whatever emotions or some sort of something that's could be different for each, like you and I, we could be
Uh-huh.
accepting different answers, right? That would be something that they could track. So there was more consistency, right? Based
Mhm.
off of the client's facial expressions or whatever is right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like part of this too, or
They
tones.
Yeah, so they can do a lot with the integrity and like fidelity of treatment through some of this. Yeah.
That's super. They're calling third party auditing.
Yeah.
This is kind of scary to me.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what Central Reach is doing too, essentially,
Yeah,
is like some of the auditing pieces, like being able to like flag things that are not like accurate or the information's not in there. So
wow.
yeah, it's really interesting.
It is super interesting. They said a public school is piloting a AI chat bot. Is that what you're
Mhm.
talking about?
Yeah.
To provide basic counseling and mental health support to students seeking help. So it's replacing a person, right?
Yeah.
Wow. It, however, analysis reveals the chat box is displaying gender bias, dismissing concerns shared by female students as much higher rate than male counterparts.
Hmm.
This is really interesting. Yeah, it goes into a lot of different things on here that I wouldn't have even thought of. But that I think is where you get into discussions about human versus bot
Uh-huh.
because humans, everybody's different too. We all have different experiences, different, I mean, we talk about this nonstop about my background, my environment, my learned experiences versus a bot it's what's programmed.
Hmm.
So whatever is put into that, which is what I think this is saying too. Of the
Yeah, I think you still need people as far as like who's inputting the information into the bots, who's making the bots, like who's like
Because what I think is
doing it.
important, what you might think is important could be different. So that
Yeah.
bot is, if you're doing it, it's going to be, well, this is what I think should
Hmm.
go into the bot, the creator, and versus me. So you're going to have
Yeah.
a whole bunch of Nicole's
Yeah.
or a whole bunch of Farah's, right?
Hmm.
Is or whoever is creating it, those that combined creation of whoever's creating it, which is super interesting. Um,
Yeah, and it's talking about, yeah, like obtaining informed consent, prioritizing transparency, and maintaining data, privacy, security, so legal regulations with it. I mean, there's all the same things as like you have to get consent for telehealth. Like it's a similar kind of like consent to utilize AI features.
yeah, this is
Um,
really interesting
Now,
to
yeah, like they're talking about consent pieces as far as like using actual like bots, like they're probably programming like personal information as well.
well, it's like what's his name? Elon Musk
But
is doing all of that.
yeah.
And he's I've heard him talk about the same thing as if it's programmed, if you're programming a bot of some sort, you're programming them a certain way. So then and then do you program them to think? And so then what happens? Because it still goes back to how they're programmed. And it's very interesting because I'm like, anything that's good will be
Hmm.
bad. Like there's always going to be
Yeah.
a downside,
Yes.
because they're not human. And then they're like, well, you can program them to be your friend, to be like all these
Hmm.
things. So what does that look like? And the same with going back to our fields is do you program it to be a certain way, like this is how we
Mhm.
all do it. So are we going to get a very robotic response of, which is why we talk about in our field, why we have many techs,
Yeah.
because you have generalization and you have different differences, slight
Mhm.
differences, sometimes, and so then you get a generalized response, whether that's the
Yeah.
environment, people, stimuli, whatever it is that we're doing, right?
Mhm.
So that may, unless you're programming bots to be different slightly, but then how do
Well,
you do?
yeah, I don't know. That's kind of hard too because like if you use like so if I'm logged into a chat feature that's AI, right?
Yeah.
It starts to learn me. Like it starts
Oh,
to
yeah,
learn like what I will typically ask it to do.
that's true.
So it's interesting like but then
Just like your phone.
yeah.
It's the same thing. Your
Yeah.
algorithms
Yes.
change to you and you see the things that it thinks you will, it'll go to your interest and your, like what
Mm-hmm.
he thinks you want to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what, I mean, if I look at your phone, you look at my phone, and we would look at what, I would probably know what you're interested, because it would show you that.
Yeah.
Um, it's so interesting because even like if you go to when people are going into the election, it shows you the things that you want to see because it learns what you're scrolling and then it only shows you those things. So I would assume for like ABA, the same thing would occur,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, which I think is I think that's my biggest concern is
That's
like
the bias and the,
yeah, is like yeah, is the bias piece and also that when you are diagnosed with autism, like one of the main pieces is the social interactions that you have with other people and being able to recognize like other people and have
yeah.
those social experiences. So in some ways, it can take an individual with autism and have them even further removed from
Mm,
like social experiences.
that's true because that's what's going to happen
Yeah.
as they move through. I mean, even if you think about, when we were kids, our parents were kids, our grandparents were kids. I mean, we all know it's kids are on phones, kids are on tablets.
Hmm.
And even
Yeah.
if they play a sport, they play the sport, and then what do? I mean, you walk in a room with teenagers or anybody that has been exposed to electronic stuff, and they literally will be sitting around not and communicating through their phone.
Hmm.
I watch that all the time. I'm like, why are you guys together? They're like, we're talking. I'm like, but there's no words.
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the same thing with this. It's gonna adjust to what each person, that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah,
Is
it will also, yeah, it will adjust to what like the interests of those people. So it also limits some of the interests that other people have,
yes.
which
Is why we
there's pros and cons, I guess, that you could argue either way
yeah.
on anything. Like look at like virtual reality. The virtual reality programs can teach vocational skills to individuals with disability is
Mhm.
probably much better than like being physically like at the job because the social pieces are so challenging.
Yeah.
But then it is also limiting because you don't learn the job with environmental like distractions or other
Oh,
people. They
right.
could probably make the virtual reality, right? Like have certain distractions and like, yeah, you're asking customers, like there's plenty of articles on that, like teaching them how to ask or people how to ask like customers what they want to order and things like that.
Yeah.
I
But it's
still,
true, it's still different.
it's still
Anything
different,
hands-on.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, even when we're training people to different positions in the company, they all say it's you can teach me, but until I'm in it and I'm in the realness of what happens in that
Hmm.
position, you really don't know, right?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what they're saying.
Yeah. You can't possibly program for everything that could happen, right, Santa?
That's
Yeah.
so funny. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just very interesting because some of this stuff do you want me to pull up another article or
Yeah, sure.
um it's just very interesting. Which one do you want me to pull?
That one. That one's kind of cool. So they're
Ooh.
using AI to
Oh,
diagnose individuals with autism. So this article's by Wall and some other authors as well. But they are looking at how to diagnose using AI features. Which is just kind of interesting. Like I didn't read through all of it, but I was just trying to find, like what is the current research out there right now for AI and applied behavior analysis. And so they're talking about doing some of the interviewing through AI.
interesting.
Yeah.
Because the problem I'm going to see with this is it's very specific versus a
Mm,
human that picks up on something that might be
mhm.
slightly different. Because I mean, the
Yeah.
spectrum's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is this saying you have to display this exactly like this, right?
It could be, yeah.
And how does it adjust? And
Hmm.
let's say I'm a doctor, I'm sitting down diagnosing, and is this actually doing it for you or is this helping you? Because wouldn't it learn a specific way, maybe the way that I'm implementing it or programming it, or I don't know, I just see it, it's not going to have that, I would think, the biggest spectrum, which I guess could be good and bad, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes kids maybe get a diagnosis of autism and maybe that's not actually the right diagnosis and vice versa. So, I mean, I think there's pros and cons to that too, right?
There's definitely pros and cons to it because yeah, I guess they could over diagnose, but they did put an algorithm in. Um and then they're able to yeah, like have that person interact with the AI feature and then it will interview for you. The biggest benefit that I'm seeing is that when you diagnose an individual with autism, it can be a lot for that individual.
Yeah.
It can be like a lot of tests, it could be a lot of time. And so this shortens the exam like time for individuals, which is probably the biggest
What's
benefit.
that?
This is just showing like the scores of like the algorithm that they use. So
Okay.
it's they call it like a decision tree score. Um, but it's kind of yeah, I mean, I think it can take away some of the length of time that the individual's there doing testing. It might be more accurate.
I'd
I'm
be
not sure.
curious. I think with
Yeah.
more time, there's probably not a ton
There's
of data.
probably no, there's definitely not. They do list like some limitations. And a lot of the limitations are that this is something new and we
Yeah.
don't have a lot of research on it and those areas.
How cool though that they already do. So that's good. But yeah, this is going to be really
Yeah.
interesting to see what happens. But the whole point is the time, right? Saving time.
Yes, it's saving time and hopefully being a little bit more accurate with it. Because you don't have like the biases of
Yeah.
like because my experience with characteristics of autism might be different than your experience with characteristics of autism, and therefore you might diagnose somebody that I wouldn't. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of taking away some of that piece too. They talk about ethical statements as well in here. Um,
Yeah,
but
this is really interesting
yeah.
about, yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing. I mean, one of the biggest questions I would say that when
Yeah.
is, do you think it's overdiagnosed? Do you think that's why what is the
I
latest
think
one
there's a
in?
lot of like overlap between characteristics of autism and other diagnoses. So I think that it can get people can be overly diagnosed, not just with autism, but with like other things. Like
Right.
once somebody has like five different diagnoses, I'm kind of questioning that to say,
Yeah.
like, do all of these characteristics kind of fall under like one or two things versus five? I have
do see
some,
that a lot.
I have my own biases because I have my own children who have diagnoses and and one of them, I don't think that it is like the correct diagnosis. And so, but had I not been in this field or had the type of education that I have, I probably would have just listened to whatever doctor is telling me that they have
Well, and you see
this.
that a lot too,
Yeah.
where you're like, something's not. Well, even with my own children, I mean, you really have to advocate, do your own,
Yeah.
like, well, we're in the field, but I'm really, well, of course, we're like, wait a minute, and we really dive in, and then you have to go and give your opinion and like steer the clinician, I
Hmm.
feel, the doctor, like, wait a minute, this is what's really going on, because
Yeah.
that's what I had to do. I mean,
Yes.
definitely. So that's interesting. So AI, they're saying, will take a lot of that out
Yeah.
because you're going to have a specific criteria that doesn't have the bias
Hmm.
in, right?
Hmm.
And so that's interesting. That'd be interesting to see what occurs over time.
Yeah, it
And
would
and
be.
just the waiting lists are crazy. So I wonder if that would be helpful too, because you would be able to get more
That
in.
that's a good point. I'm sure that was listed in there and I didn't. That's a good point because yeah, they're talking about it taking less time. So maybe yeah, you wouldn't
Mhm.
have such long wait lists, which would be beneficial. As we know that early intervention is also as important as it is.
Well, and you're
But
talking years sometimes. The wait lists are years.
oh yeah, they're years. Yeah.
I know, I think children still is, right? Isn't it like 18 months to 2 years
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think the other thing, I don't know if you read this in there, but like if you talk about the bots with act as the tech, right? That was one
Hmm.
of the things. I'm assuming that would be in there as you wouldn't have the turnover. You'd have the consistency
Hmm.
because it's a high field. I mean, it's a stressful field, and so you have turnover and things like that. So I'm curious if they haven't, what they would say with time that would
Hmm.
create, because you'd have the
Yeah.
consistency of the same bots, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, maybe.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's another way to look at it too, because maybe treatment wouldn't go on for as long.
Well, you wouldn't have Collins. It'd
Well,
be
yeah,
consistent with that because
because
they
you would
would,
have consistency. You would, yeah.
I mean, I guess bots could break down,
Hmm.
but I would think you wouldn't have the sickness, the all of that kind of, that's super interesting. Because I mean,
Hmm.
that's one of the downfalls of the field
Uh-huh.
is that the consistency sometimes is obviously splintered because somebody is not here anymore or sick or vacationed or there's a gap of services or treatments. So that'd be
Hmm.
super interesting. What do you have here? What's this one?
Oh, this is using AI or like virtual reality pieces, like within a classroom
Oh,
setting to teach, like appropriate like classroom behaviors.
okay.
So a lot of the research I had to find was more related to education, and what that looked like versus like applied behavior analysis. Or there's some research articles on this with like vocational settings, but there's still not a ton out there. So if you're thinking about doing research, especially in our field, then I would highly encourage more research to be done with AI pieces. But they're basically just teaching like classroom instruction through AI features.
Oh,
Um,
that's super
so
interesting.
yeah.
I just thought of something when I talked to the teachers in Union Grove. Some of the younger ones that like haven't been around for a long time, so they have a lot of this stuff kind of happening.
Yeah.
So within Google somewhere, when they're putting let me see if I can get this right. They have the tests and those kind of things in there, and so now they can give the test through Google. So
Hmm.
the students go in there and do the test, and then Google immediately grades it. So they don't have any work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, "Are you
That would
serious?"
work. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's like, "Yeah, it's awesome.
Hmm.
We don't have to worry about it anymore."
They really don't even need to create the test at all.
That
Like,
too. Now
yeah.
that you say that I'm
Yeah.
sure they just, and I go, well, are you worried about them getting a hold of that? And she goes,
Hmm.
oh yeah, I'm
Hmm.
concerned about that. And that, but the Google whatever can detect if
Mhm.
they're
Like searching stuff or
something.
like
There's some
trying to find the answer.
But she goes, we do have to keep changing it up because all you have to do is get a hold of it. And
Yeah.
then prior years, but she goes, it's easy because it's all done for you. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, where you'd sit down with paper and pencil and do it.
That's so true. Yeah.
She was like, that's a thing of the past. And I'm like, I know there are lots of teachers that still do the paper and pencil, but they're
Mhm.
usually ones that have been around for a while. But these are
Yeah.
younger teachers in the last, I would say, couple of years. And I was like, that is interesting. She goes, yeah, we don't have to grade anything. It does it all. They literally finish and the grades there. Isn't that?
That's cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
forgot about that when I went to
Yeah.
Italy with them.
There's
They were all saying how it's changed so much. There's a lot of younger teachers there. So that's I thought was fascinating too. It's
really
the time
interesting.
is not, you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
So anyway, I
Yeah.
just kind of, so that's kind of what this stuff is, breaking down
That's what
materials
this
and
is saying.
methods.
Yeah. Yeah, they make all their classroom materials. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Privacy protection analysis.
yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, they do all their like grading, I think, or yeah, test taking.
That's what she's saying.
Yeah.
That it's all simple. And when she was worried about, because she did talk about papers. This
Hmm.
particular class doesn't write a lot of papers, the one that I was really talking with.
Yeah.
But now that you're saying what you said at the beginning of our conversation with this was there is something that can detect it for sure.
Yeah.
I know that when I have gone in Facebook, like our forums, to look at like, should I make this sound a little better? It's kind of fragmented or whatever. There is definitely a line of like, you can tell that that was me and was not because it uses specific words over and over again. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. Hmm.
Like there's a certain, I'm like, that's so a computer. Like, I can't even think of the words now, but there's definitely about 5 to 10 words that it constantly uses over and over again that I take out and I like try to find a synonym or something close to it. But it does make it much quicker because if it'll say like professional, funny,
Yeah.
long, like whatever, make it longer. I don't know how it says it, but so that's interesting. But she did say that. She did say that there is something to find it, but they did flag a student and said they were plagiarizing and then they weren't. So there was something that didn't work either. And the student fought it, showed what I don't know how they showed it. So that's what I mean, like where the problem's going to come from and how do you, it's interesting. Those are the pros and cons, I guess. But
Yeah.
this is fascinating. It's really
It
embedded
is.
in so many areas. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I'm just thinking of like where else it's in our life, really. It's in all areas. I'm trying to think. I mean, our cars.
Hmm.
My car the other day, because it's a newer car, it went off and I couldn't figure out where it went off, but I guess there's a camera for crashes and it started like doing this weird thing and I don't know where that came from. You even have like smoke detectors and things like that in your house that are sensitive to certain things and they pick up things that are wrong or not, your alarms. I'm trying to think of all the things. I mean, your phone is literally listening all the time and comments and takes things and it changes your algorithms. That's kind of scary.
Yeah. It can be.
Yeah, I mean, it tracks everywhere you go,
Yeah.
everywhere. Like it always has a thing on you. So it can figure out like where you, like I remember the car is a smart car, pretty essentially. And I remember the first week it tracked where I went. I got in the car and it popped up on my screen where I was going because of all of last week. It figured out my pathway through the week.
Yeah.
So it laid out my day and it had like, are you going here or here? And I'm like, whoa. I was like, what is happening? So that's kind of freaky. So anyway,
there's pros and cons to it,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, it laid out the pathway, but then another piece is that it also tells you what speed limit that you're supposed to like that all the roads are too.
That's true.
Yeah, because like the roads that you travel the most, it will memorize the speed limit and
Yeah.
then like tell you how fast to go. And I like that portion too. So I don't know, it's like that's a plus, but then there's also like
Well-
the negative of it knows everywhere I'm going.
For sure. And this one actually has, I don't know what you call it, but it reads the signs. So if the speed limit changed, it can
Yeah.
read it and it'll pop up and say speed limit, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it will tell you. It reads the stop signs, like if something, because you know they have construction
Yeah.
like here up this road.
Right.
So now it's like it's going down. It like tells you, and I'm like, I mean, it doesn't talk, but it like shows you on your screen or like whatever. I suppose it probably does talk. I don't know how to do it. But it's like, you know, it's just so different. So you just wonder like what's to come.
Yeah.
Because if it's already doing this.
Yeah.
So like even in reference to the field, I suppose the pros would be something new comes out and you're doing something that has been disproven or right or been there's a better way to do it or a different way or it's been updated or it's yeah we did another research and it's proven again that this is a great way to do this. I would assume that AI would be able to do that right away for you.
Yeah.
In the programming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I'm
like,
thinking
treatment.
like our future would be that there wouldn't be any wait lists for services, that there would be maybe more
That's
like
true.
integrity or fidelity for treatment.
That's true.
That there would be, you know, better maybe notes or documentation of like services. So less time, which equals more time with the children or adults or you know.
For sure. And you wouldn't have to like be looking up everything because it would, so the legal and the changes, like this year, we had a lot of changes that, you know, came up. It would immediately be like, oh, you can't do this anymore because of this. The law changed or whatever, right? And it would come up and you wouldn't have to, because right now it's a lot of areas to go and look. Like what's happening here? What's happening here?
Yeah.
What changed here? And it's like a full-time job in each area to like keep up on it.
Yeah.
So that would be, I think, very positive if you would have it come right into it. So yeah, so this was super interesting. I think we could talk about this for a long time, honestly. But yeah, so thanks for bringing the articles, and it'll be really interesting to follow up on this maybe in a year. And we can talk about like what has changed, what have we implemented, because we do have access to a lot of these things now.
We do, yeah.
So yeah. Well, thank you everybody.
Thank you.
It was an interesting topic and we'll see you later. See you next time. Bye.